Hi guys, welcome to Flow with Josef and Lazo, and today we'll be talking about evil.
Hi again, everyone. So, evil is a natural part of life. Evil is a problem that we haven't been able to fix for since we've been alive, really, as humans, as a race. And I think it has a lot to do with power. Now, today we're going to go over evil. We're going to try and decipher the enigma, which is evil, by talking about psychological studies, psychological theories, psychologists, real life examples, and see what we can make out of this podcast session.
Yeah, no, I definitely think evil is something that is a fact. Like evil is there, right?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
every single religion, whether you're for a religion or you're an atheist or agnostic, or whether you believe in capitalism or communism or utilitarianism, you believe in evil basically. And I feel that the problem of evil is that it's logistically there, right? But there's many different aspects of why it's there. Is it, the shadow self? Is it the id, the ego? Is it is it genetically there? Is it because we're a bit more Neanderthal than, Homo sapien sometimes? Or is it because of past trauma? Or is it because of like a spiritual, like a metaphysical state that we can't fathom? So, like, what do you think about power in terms of evil?
The reason why I think power is a direct root of evil is because when you're more powerful than someone, it's very easy to take advantage of them. So think about if you're in a scenario and you're facing someone who's younger than you, weaker than you, not maybe as strong as you. So if you wanted to take something from them, it's simple, right? We see this in every instant. In like a small account of evil or power dynamic. Think about if you have siblings. Your older sibling is more dominant than you. Your older sibling has more responsibility than you. Your older sibling is stronger than you, right? Think about it on the street when people often get mugged. It's women. It's women with a handbag. It's older women. A, a thief who might be 5'8", 5'9" of the male gender might not go for the um, exact version of himself on the street to mug, or even someone bigger than him, right? They might see someone who's like a bodybuilder. They might be scared. So a power dynamic is key to evil because it is easier to take advantage of those who are below us in that sense.
No, I definitely think that's a huge part of it, but I don't think that's the full story. Like we see things constantly in the past where governments have been toppled, like the French Revolution, for example, where it was actually the big fish, it was the leaders, the wealthy that were getting executed by the peasants, or like for example, certain places in the world, like Mexico or South Africa, where the poorest people sometimes resort to violence and stuff, and it's actually become a norm in places like that,
Wait,
where
sorry, just to counteract that, we talk about the French Revolution, we talk about these type of revolutions. It's massive numbers though, because what we find is like, for example, if you've looked at the French Revolution, yes, there was a monarch and there was a handful of them keeping all the power. The poor people were only able to overthrow them when they got together. So it was almost the ratio of 1 to 1,000. If 1,000 people were going to get together, it was hard to take down even one monarch. It's like
what if one guy half the size armed with a gun, he can take down 10 people of the same power, physical.
yeah, but then you're changing the dynamic
Yeah.
exactly because now you're saying I have something that you biologically and physically don't have. I have a gun. However, the same could be said in you can have a gun.
Yeah.
Um,
What if, for example, things like this always happen where where you have people like have you watched the film Parasite?
I
All
have
right, no,
seen
like
Parasite. Yes,
no
yes,
spoilers, but basically like how people within a facility or within a company or whatever can like eat it from within.
definitely,
So that's
definitely.
that's that's like what have they got? They've got
Countries
nothing right
can
now.
break apart from within. We've seen communism break apart from within. Revolutions break apart from within. It's uh, it's crazy. It's crazy to say the least. What gets to me more than anything
Yeah.
else is how much of a lack of understanding we have as the human race, or generally speaking, about the individual acts of evil that we are capable of. Because yes, we can talk about groups, and it's easier to be evil within a group when everyone else is doing it. But to individually be capable of these things, there are a lot of people who thought in their life they could never do such things, and then they end up doing mass atrocities, and you're like, what happened, right?
Like Adolf Hitler, for example, like he was described as an artist, painter growing up and stuff, and suddenly, he killed, countless number of like 16 million Jews, and even
Oh, I
more
think
like
more than
disabled
that.
people,
I think more than
what do
that.
you call black people, people had with mental illnesses. Do you get me? And it's like, people probably could never have fathomed, like people who were voting for him and stuff, and people initially who were listening to his speeches could never even have thought that this would be the result.
What if I told you the signs were there, in a way?
The signs were definitely there, 100%.
Because what Hitler did, more than being the leader that he was, actually very brave with his demands to casually just say, hey, like, these people are believers, it was manipulated. This concept of the Jewish people being below the German people, the Aryan race, was put out there in the media constantly. And Hitler very carefully put this out there for a long time before real acts of evil were actually committed. But Hitler is a really good example of how our leadership, our societal structures can lead the most normal people into the strangest of evil acts.
And isn't it weird that like one man's evil kind of like multiplied and multiplied until a whole society was committing evil, armies were committing evil, and it all started off with one person. Like evil can actually, like I feel that evil brings about more evil.
It spreads. It literally spreads. I know I can't biologically prove how evil spreads, but it does. It's like a cancer. And when you choose somebody to be your country's representative, like this person is now you. So you look at Hitler. Not only did he become the leader of Germany, but Hitler now speaks for you. Hitler now speaks to you inside the country and outside the country. If Hitler looks bad, you look bad. Because back then you didn't even have social media. So if Hitler was going somewhere and acting a certain way, it was a direct representation of the German people. These days, if governments do something wrong, we can get on social media and say, we do not support this. We did not want the Iraq war, for example. You couldn't do that back then. So you had to get behind them because it was seen as unity. And in a foolish way, it was seen as, oh, if we agree with our leader, it can't be evil. It's patriotism. Do you know what I mean?
I feel like evil goes from the top down, though, not the bottom up. Because I feel like, whoever is in charge, like, for example, Kim Jong-un and stuff, could easily have propaganda and promote that kind of stuff until, one generation is completely mentally brainwashed into thinking that this is the right way. Or supreme leader. We've seen this in the USSR, we've seen this in China, we've seen this in China. We've seen this in North Korea. We've seen this with Hitler as well. Like a group of people in the top, right? Yeah. Washing down to the bottom, where people who have nothing to do, like nothing against Jewish people, nothing against black people or homosexual people or disabled people, right? Now hating them because of being brainwashed into thinking this is the right way.
I completely agree, and I think the reason for that is that often, because we are very social creatures and we're in hierarchies, we're constantly in hierarchies, whether or not we are conscious of it. Because we're in hierarchies, we naturally follow the strongest or the elected official of some kind. And this is where we draw comparisons to our ancestors and to general animal species. We are mammals, in all honesty, and I've said this so many times. That's why we don't follow the weakest, because we have been programmed to elect and choose or fight for the right to be the strongest within a group. I think that's directly why we don't listen to the person who's below everybody shouting and screaming, "You're crazy, what are you doing? Don't kill Jews." But must also be said, within the Nazi regime, not within the regime itself, because that would have been way too risky, but however, a lot of everyday German people did save many Jews. They went against the norm, but for the majority of the German people, they followed Hitler.
Isn't that mad though? Like the actual like aspect of evil, right? It had to be there for them to be good. So is it almost that we can't actually have experience good or understand good or see good or fathom good or comprehend good without having evil there? Like for example, we are only living because we can die. Like, do you get me? That's why the state of living is living, whether it be plants or animals.
No,
so
I agree.
Don't you think that because there is evil, it's just for us to understand or comprehend that the good things can happen as well? Otherwise, if there was no evil, then how would we know what is good?
I agree with you completely. It's like Jordan Peterson always says, like, a rabbit is not virtuous because it can't kill, because it's not a predator. Say that? Yeah, Jordan Peterson gives this example. Like, if let's talk about humans then. You're only a good person when you are capable of evil and you don't do it. You are not a good person if you are not capable of evil and just don't do it. What I'm trying to say is, if if me and somebody else have a certain power dynamic and I'm never able to get anything over them, I'm never able to physically hurt them, I'm never able to lie to them with confidence, I'm never able to deceive them basically, then I'm just innocent. It doesn't make me a good person. I'm just innocent. I don't have it within me to be evil. I'm only a good person when I have it within me and I consciously decide not to act evil. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, like we're always complaining about like what you call no, if I was in this situation I would have done this, or like when we talk about our political leaders or something. But the thing is, would you really though? Like, it's easy for you to sit down and say that, oh, I'll do this, I would, be, end all corruption and stuff, and all this activism that's happening right now, this shallow activism. Could we not say that, look, if you were actually in that position though, you would rinse it out, like absolutely take everything apart?
Maybe. People go mad with power. I was in high school and I remember my teacher got a promotion. It was actually a temporary one because someone was on maternity leave, and she just now was a so-called senior teacher who would get called up if certain things happened. And this woman changed. And this woman was my teacher for 3 years throughout high school. And the last year of high school, when she got this promotion, she was not the same person. You couldn't even, in a jokey way, speak out like we used to. You would get sent out straight away. So this was like...
So was she evil?
I think she just became like... She started asserting the responsibility of this new job role in every aspect that she did. So the way she had acted for 2 years beforehand, she could not do that anymore. Does that make her evil? No, I don't think that makes her evil. But that's the manipulation that power can do. And it's a very biological thing. I think that's why we actually are so in control of it, because the chemicals start shooting off in our brains and we kind of just go mad.
I think we have no idea of our potential for, malevolence and how much harm we can actually do. And I feel like the average person doesn't actually sit down and, take into consideration what, you could possibly do, and, the evil we're capable of day-to-day lives. Because we don't actually introspectively look at ourselves, we don't know what we can do. And that's the dangerous thing. That's what, for example, Philip Zimbardo wanted to look at.
Yeah.
Because he was like, look, what happened with the Nazis, right? Normal German people, the good German people, right? Who had so many Jews within themselves, actually went against him. And he's like, could this happen in America as well? And also the Abu Ghraib prison experiment, which happened afterwards. Not experiment, the actual atrocity that took place
events,
after.
Yeah.
So this thing about, the potential, like, to commit evil is such a strong thing. Like, we don't know, me and you could do some really evil shit. It's in our capacity to do it, but stopping ourselves from doing it is the good thing. Do you get me?
I'll give you a quick quote from Dostoevsky, which I don't know if I've pronounced that right because there's so many different ways to pronounce it. But nothing is easier than to denounce the evildoer. Nothing is more difficult than to understand him. And that's, like you said, that's what Philip Zimbardo wanted to understand. Now, Philip Zimbardo, if we go into it in the Stanford prison experiment, what ended up happening is that this man wanted to know, if I create a fake prison experiment and I only take normal, without mental health, without illness,
neurotypicals, basically,
neurotypical people, how were they going to react in either being in a prison cell or in the sense of having power? If I randomly make you a god, how will that make you change? And the results were astounding.
So how were they actually chosen? They were chosen by, randomly flicking a coin. They were exactly the same. So the people who became prison guards and prisoners were exactly the same. Like, there was nothing wrong with them. The age, the genders, everything the same.
They were volunteers.
Exactly.
To begin with, yeah.
It was such a surprise to the whole world. Like, he had to emergency end the whole session because they started, rubbing shit all over them, putting them in, closets overnight. The prisoners started doing hunger strikes. They were beat up. They were, dehumanized. They were called by numbers rather than their names.
That was deliberate, actually. Philip Zimbardo suggested that because he said we have to create some form of realness. Like, it's going to be a situation where you don't want to do a prison experiment and make the guy sound like your friend. So, but what he could never have expected was the accounts that went further. This experiment took place in 1971 on August 14th to August 20th. It was meant to be a 2-week program in which every volunteer got $15 a day, which is equivalent to about $95 of today's money if you look at inflation. A lot of people thought it was easy money. A lot of people wanted to go in for all sorts of different reasons. Like as Ava said, they were neurotypicals. They were very normal people. and then within a space of 6 days, it had
But
to
all
be shut
like
down.
Yale University students, weren't they? Most.
No, no, no. There was like one specific student, for example, who was a graduate from a Canadian university who had moved to the area.
So all different types of people, basically.
Different types of people, but neurotypicals and young men.
Yeah.
Young men who mostly had academic backgrounds. So you look at society, and society will often tell you that, oh, in some ways, the better people among you are the educated. Well, these were educated people, and this is what they were capable of. And they made all sorts of atrocities right from the beginning, and this only took 1 or 2 days. If the prisoners wanted a toilet break, in order to make sure that they believed that it was a prison and they didn't see the university around them, they put paper bags over their head, they chained their ankles, and then they would escort them to the toilets. But the craziest thing is, bear in mind, look, these people were innocent of all crimes.
Both the prisoners and the people, what you call the guards, were completely innocent people, and that's the weird thing. Like, evil can come about just like that, just because of the situation. So what Zimbardo showed in that experiment is that, we try to change the environment, but sometimes the environment can change you. So you might be all good, right? You might be the good American citizen, but the thing is, once you get into the environment, like Abu Ghraib, what happened afterwards? So after this experiment, right? There are outrageous pictures on the internet from Abu Ghraib in Iraq.
Abu Ghraib prison.
So they piled living people, like dead bodies, and put shit all over them, and they had no food. They beat them all. They raped prisoners. They did the worst kind of treatment.
They scared them with dogs.
They were American soldiers, normal American soldiers, who, because of the environment and because of the power as well that they were given over these people, some of them were not even some of them were just refugees. They were just like there was nothing actual. There's no evidential claims against them.
I'll take it one step further. Some of these soldiers, by the way, and especially the one that Philip Zimbardo ended up not defending but helping represent at court, this man had 9 medals of honor. This man was actually considered a hero, and you know what? More power to him. I'm sure he was. I'm not here to knock veterans or anyone within the cause, but this man was proven to be a good soldier, and then was put in that situation and completely corrupted himself. But that's where it goes back to the point of power. The exact comparison that can be drawn between Stanford Prison Experiment and Abu Ghraib isn't so much the conditions, because the Stanford Prison Experiment was fake. It was the lack of accountability and the amount of control that the guards had. Now, Philip Zimbardo was looking at everything that was going on throughout the whole period, right? However, he would never step in. So the hierarchy that he put down to lay down the rules, they had their own way. And within themselves, they had their own hierarchy, and there was no one to hold them accountable. And fast forward to Iraq, fast forward to Abu Ghraib prison, same situation happened. There was no one here to hold those soldiers accountable, and these people had 20-hour shifts of being on guard duty to people that they actually suspected of being terrorists, right? So firstly, with that label, right, to begin with, you're not going to give them remorse, because you're like, oh, this person's a terrorist. But secondly, again, it's about the thing. If I'm given complete control over you, then what I can do is almost limitless, right?
It's just down to the imagination, basically, because even day-to-day life, like human beings, when they're like something bad happens to them, or we see this in road rage, or in an office environment. Like, you imagine the worst kind of thing you could do to the person only if you had the power over them to do it. Do you get me? So I feel like we can't just say there are evil people and good people. What is good people and what is evil people? There's both. Like, everyone has, like Carl Jung said, the shadow. So everyone has the potential to do evil and elicit, the worst kind of treatment to other people.
Yo, can I make one point? I should have made this like a second ago. But if you actually recall, the American administration came out and said their excuse for the Abu Ghraib situation was there was just a few bad apples, right, in the barrel, and then the bad apples made the rest of the apples worse. And this is what Philip was going against. He was like, no, that can't be it. There's got to be. What he did, which I really admire, was he believed that there was a circumstantial reason for evil. Yeah. And it's brilliant. We'll get back onto it more later, but like you said, we're moving on to to the
Which I keep
concept of
saying
the
as
shadow.
well, like what you call, like for example, we see this with John F. Kennedy, like when he tried to reform the Pentagon, but when he actually went into government, he started the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Cold War, all of that kind of stuff, Vietnam. So we see that people from the outside, they can see an institution and say, oh, that's evil or whatnot, but when they're actually a part of that institution, they actually act like the institution. They think like the institution.
Maybe we're all just judging then. Maybe all we're doing is projecting. We're here saying, oh, look, there's problems in the world. Let's blame our government. And then you get into government and you realize... Because, no, think about it. How many world leaders haven't gone into war? How many powerful world leaders, by the way? If you're going to mention a small country in the middle of nowhere and say, oh, they never went to war, they can't. Let's be honest about it. They can't. Like we said, it's about power. Same thing happens on an individual level. Same thing happens on a governmental level. The countries that you see taking from other countries are the more powerful countries all the time. And this is not exclusive to the West.
No, we see this in Egypt, for example. So Egypt, with the Nile, what's happening right now
the Nile River, yeah.
Yeah. So Ethiopia and Sudan and other, countries which are trying to build dams on the Nile, Egypt is going against them because the Nile flows out towards Egypt. So, for example, if Ethiopia built a dam, which they need because they need to have more electricity and stuff, obviously, and it's going through their country, for them to pick. But what's happening downstream is that Egypt has less water and less energy and stuff to power its people and electricity and stuff. So even on that scale, right, there are countries exerting dominance over the other. Or what we saw, the football war between El Salvador and Honduras, it literally happened for 24 hours, but just a country which is more powerful exerting, trying to exert control over the other. And this is known in Latin America where, if they have a problem, they're like, okay, we need to invade another country just to get people's mind off it. With what happened with the Falkland invasion of Argentina, which, Margaret Thatcher didn't stand back on.
This is a very common theme, and I'll do you one better in terms of water supplies. The Kurdish people of the autonomous region of Iraq actually had a referendum, and their neighbors didn't really like it. So one of the things that one of their neighbors did to the north, which was Turkey, they actually threatened to cut all water lines to the Kurdish regions. Because the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, which is a huge staple of in the Middle East, you read about those two rivers when you talk about Mesopotamia, right? Those two rivers both start in Turkey, and Turkey has a lot of dams, and they literally threaten to cut it off. And by the way, water is a natural human right. Do you know what I mean? This isn't just cutting funds. This is things that you need to survive. The countries do it all the time. You'll talk about Mario Factory in Argentina. The wars are countless. The proxy wars are countless. We're not here to talk about that, but it is so draining. We could fill pages and pages worth of the amount of inhumane acts that have been done. Just look at the last 120 years, Jordan. Stalin, Hitler, Mao. You can put some Western leaders in there. Yeah. It's ridiculous, honestly.
Or evil could come from a virus. Right now, basically. It doesn't even need to come from human beings. For example, am I in control of earthquakes happening, or storms in the sea, or people's livelihoods getting destroyed, or the American coast, what's happening there with hurricanes and stuff? There's natural evil as well. So evil is there regardless of if human beings became good. If only we became good, there'll still be suffering, there'll still be evil, there'll still be kids dying, there'll still be old age. What Buddha kind of fathomed about sickness and all that kind of stuff. So evil is beyond that. I think evil is there. Regardless of what we say, what we attribute it to.
Everything, I believe, starts with yourself, and I think we should flow on to the individual acts of evil, and this is where we should introduce to you guys the concept of the shadow, beautifully written by Carl Jung in his psychological memoirs. The shadow is the part of you which you keep your worst desires, you keep your worst inhibitions, and if not faced, will slowly manifest itself into acts of evil. Carl Jung believed you can only fix this by facing it, but he also knew and understood that humans were not able to do that because we never want to be seen as the bad guy. We don't want to be seen as the bad person within society. Again, for many other reasons, such as biological ones. If you think about our hunter and gatherer days, and if we were like the bad one within the group, we were probably exiled. So we never want to be seen as people who take the blame. However, before I make further points, anything you want to say about the shadow?
Yeah, no, definitely. I actually want to talk about it, using the shadow, actually, because Robert Greene's latest book, The Laws of Human Nature, which you should all have read by now. What do you call? He talks about actually using the shadow because it's there. Like, if like there's like, for example, if you have a bad habit of like getting at people, right? Like, that one person who just will point every negative thing about you. Who's always critical of things. Like, they could have a job where they actually analyze things and political events and political leaders, and they could do all of that. They could put all that dark energy into a productive means and then be normal the rest of the time. Do you get me? So there needs to be outlets, and everyone knows their own way of having these outlets for different things in your shadow self, because it's not just one type of thing. You may have a habit of swearing, profanity, whatever. So, having these outlets, and you have to realize in your own life to, what these outlets are for you and what's easy for you to do. But if it's repressed and these outlets are not there naturally, then, you could be harmed by your shadow, to be honest.
The problem is,
like, when we say shadow, we don't mean some like metaphysical state. We it could be anything, like your repressed desires, or things that could cause you harm as well, not just other people.
yeah, I completely agree. Now, the concept of your shadow has manifested itself through time, and we believe has been there for everybody throughout evolution. Is the shadow necessary? Well, I think it is. Again, going back to our early days, if you needed to kill in order to get your prey, in order to eat, that's where your shadow comes out. Your shadow thrives because you're doing an evil act. Life is not black and white. Life could never be black and white. Therefore, like you said, the shadow is necessary. The problem comes not when you use the shadow, is when you don't understand the shadow, because then it will take you over and you will never realize it. Hitler could be a good example. Did Hitler know what he was doing? Because he was very much consumed by the concept of his shadow. This man went on to kill millions and millions of people. He invaded many people's lands.
So soldiers could say that, like, their shadows came out. It wasn't even them acting on it. It was, they were doing it because of Hitler's shadow.
I would say that Carl Jung says that we all act to our archetypes and to our shadows individually. This is how we are different. If we all acted the same way, if we were all capable of the same things, we would all be the same, but that's just not possible. We can be similar, but definitely not the same. And we can have shared values, and your values could be good, your values could be bad. But it's about facing it. It really, really is about facing it. It's like, if I know that I use too much profanity, if I know that I'm always aggressive in my speech, I can only fix that by facing it. I can only turn around and say, look, these problems probably start with me.
So the first step is acknowledging it, you mean?
Acknowledging, I think you know what it is.
Some people don't. They don't understand.
Honestly, I don't believe that.
Some people are literally not as introspective as you'd like to think. Like, they would literally not realize the things they're doing wrong unless someone points it out to them.
I really don't believe that. I really do believe that,
yeah.
I think, okay, I'll ask you why, but let me start. I don't believe that because there's no way you can not be conscious of your conscious self. You have a conscience. You know what you're doing. You know what you're saying. I get it. You can be in certain states where certain emotions can take over, but I don't agree that you can't be conscious of your own actions.
Sometimes things become so habitual, though. Like, we swear so much, or sometimes we do certain actions so many times, or listen to music when you're revising it, that you just become so habitual that you don't realize it anymore consciously. So your conscious mind.
Before that, though, that's my point. Like, before that, at some point, you knew you were doing that.
Yeah, but right now, if you pick some random person off the street and the things he's doing, a lot of things have become habitual. They don't really think about it in their conscious mind. They're just doing it as like muscle memory. And it's habitual. Like, for example, spending, right? Sometimes, when the first time you downloaded Google Pay, Apple Pay on your phone, and you start using that, now that's just become a habit of your spending.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that part, but in order to form a habit, you must do things X amount of times.
People don't acknowledge it's going to become a habit. Do you get me? That's why it becomes a habit.
I'm going to take this further and say they do, and I'll tell you why. Because in order to form a habit, you have to push through and do things more and more. So, for example, if you're going to the gym, which has nothing to do with evil, right? But if you're going to the gym, the first 2-3 weeks are going to be hard. The only way it becomes a habit is if you push through. Same thing with any bad tendencies.
Not really, because the gym is actually going out your way. Some things are there for a plate for you to take it. Like, for example, sleep, right? Right, sleeping is something that we have to do. So sleeping late, sleeping more, sleeping less, like, that's something that automatically happens. Going to the gym or doing some, like, monotonous task is something different. But I feel like for example,
Let's bring up an evil act of violence. If I'm somebody who starts fighting every day, if I start fighting every day, whether it's physically or verbally,
yeah.
that must be like a learned habit. I can't sit here and give people the excuse of
Some people,
you did not know what you were doing.
Yeah, but the thing is, now it's become so habitual to that person that it might be something from childhood. Like when you speak to the person now, all his life, all he remembers is just arguing every day.
Childhood. Am I hearing about Sigmund Freud here?
Yeah.
But before going on to Freud, honestly, we need to finish up on Carl Jung though. Flow with it. Here's what I think though, right? According to Carl Jung, there's three parts of your consciousness. There's your collective consciousness, there's your personal consciousness, and there's your general consciousness. Now, your personal consciousness is something you're consciously taking in, and is subliminal, but is, however, below the threshold of your actual consciousness. Your collective unconscious, is where your complex lies, and this is where your shadow is formed. And this, by the way, this is a beautiful point that we're going to go on to. Dreams. Carl Jung believed that through analyzing your dreams, not only could you understand yourself, but sometimes your shadow. Like, for example, you talked about anger and how it became a habit. Your dreams can start being angry. Your dreams could be you physically beating people. Your dreams could be a direct gateway into your mind. How does Huzaifa think? How does Huzaifa want to interact with people in his life? Are his dreams a gateway? And Carl said they were. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, like when you wake up from your dream sometimes, obviously it's things like, there's like different types of dreams, but sometimes you wake up from a dream and you're like, what the hell? That is so evil. Like, either you getting harmed by people, or you harming people, or you doing things that you could never even imagine. Like, do you get me? Like,
well, you think you couldn't?
Yeah, I remember playing a video game, right? Like a very violent video game. What do you call? And then the night after, right? This was in childhood, right? I had the worst kind of dream. I was going around on a spree, killing everything in my way and stuff. And I woke up thinking, what the hell was that? Like, I couldn't even have imagined doing that in real life.
Do you think that those that video game might have triggered something within
like
you?
Stimuli. Like, if you're watching this happen, then we're curious people, right?
Right.
Then like our mind is taking this in as stimulus. It's going to do something with it. Like we work like algorithms. You can't put something in expecting nothing to come out as a result of it.
No. Everything's energy, and energy can't be destroyed. Energy can only be transferred, and that directly relates to anger, right? So some of you might have noticed this. I think most of us do. Sometimes when you're angry, you internally feel warm, right? There's a fire inside you, and where does that fire go? Well, it's up to you. Defense mechanisms are a way for that, which we'll touch on in a bit. However, what I'm trying to say is that anger that I just described, that sense of heat within your body that comes from the anger, it has to go somewhere. The most common thing that people do is they repress it, they ignore it, and this is how it becomes a problem. This is how it feeds into the shadow. So think about it this way, right? You have this dark energy, it's within you. Instead of acting upon it, instead of facing it, when you repress it, you're feeding that dark self.
Exactly. And you don't have to just take it out on other people. You could put it out in a sport. You could do boxing. You could take it out on a ball via tennis. Like, it doesn't have to be on a person as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually a defense mechanism.
Or even, like what you call taking it out on paper, writing it down. Sometimes I've done this, right? Not many times, but I should do this more. I write down my issues on the paper, and I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm worried about. Like, when it was in my head, it was so big. It was like a snowball. But when I wrote it down, I'm like, this is nothing. Like,
yeah, you realize you can face it. It consumes you less. Or you can just genuinely
talking to someone
embrace it.
Yeah, like just talking to someone about it, and you're like, the other person's like, okay, that's it. And you realize, like, just explaining your problem to someone, and you're like, that is such a small problem. Like, I'm just overthinking it so much. Yeah. And I feel like just letting it repress, or just like, trying to hide it or run away from it is the worst thing you can do to yourself.
Sometimes it's all about perspective. Sometimes it's having support. It's needing support. The problem is, it goes back to the same thing. We don't want to hear of ourselves as imperfect. And we see this a lot. We see this in everyday life. When something goes wrong, you blame somebody else. Like, people fail an exam and they're like, this one time my lecturer didn't sufficiently put the notes up. My lecturer didn't. There are other times when you have an argument with your friend, and instead of looking at yourself, you're like, I'm not wrong. He was. She was. Why is it me? The thing is, it's not about taking blame. It's about understanding each other. Because like we said, it's easiest to judge and hardest to understand. Now, what you have to bear in mind is, because, according to Carl Jung, because these things are evolutionary tendencies, we also our shadow is also a reflection of our archetypes. An archetype is, for example, the way that our ancestors survived in the wild, and everybody reacts to their archetypes differently. Carl Jung believed that this is how you start to get individuality of evil and the shadow. And touching upon that, it's the word he used was it's psycho-evolution. It's psych-evolved. I think I've got that right. So what I'm trying to say is, if we are to believe that this shadow is a product of our evolution, which is millions of years, then don't be too hard on yourself. Just find someone, talk to somebody, try to discuss it. Why is it you're angry? What can you do next? Don't just think about punching someone in the face. Although sometimes it might be needed. I'm not even gonna lie.
It's a training, innit? Like, we need to...
It's like a muscle.
Like, going back, we need to train ourselves to think the right way. Even thinking requires training. Like, for example, all my life, I just thought I was reading the wrong way. So the other day, right, I spoke to this PhD student. He's 32. And he pointed something out to me that I completely was unaware of all my life. Like, I still didn't understand this. He was, like, reading with his eyes. And he could read, like, 500 words in, like, 30 seconds or something. Because he was reading with his eyes. But all my life, I've been reading through my mind. So, when I'm reading something, I actually, like, read it out loud in my head. Like most people do. But there's a way of reading with your eyes where you just scan it like it's just an object. Like it's a symbol or a sign. And that way you can read so much more faster. And obviously, if you practice it over time, you comprehend more of what you read as well. So it's all about practice. Like, we can literally rewire ourselves, and our brain is so plastic. We can have a perfect, working relationship with our brain, where we resolve these issues and stuff. But we just don't have, like, the time of day, or we just don't want to do these things.
we say we don't. Yeah. We say we don't.
Like, even like Lazo, how far does a 5-minute meditation session go in a day? Like,
listen,
how far does it take you?
I think it can take you very far if that's for you. I'm naturally, if any of you watch our podcast, I'm naturally so fidgety. I don't meditate. I find other ways of taking my stress out. However, no, you're right. 5 minutes of meditating for a period can be 10 minutes of meditating, and there's so many other ways now to help you with this. The concept of meditating has almost been perfected. The amount of years that we've been studying it, you can now do it better than ever. Now you don't have to be a part of the group that followed the Buddha to know about it. We have social media. You can go online. You can find all sorts of different ways to find inner peace of yourself and those around you. Honestly, I think it's harder than ever and easier than ever to actually become.
There could be a good
person.
Good reason for evil. Because I do.
See, by saying yes, I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Because what is evil, right? So if we said that there was a group of people within Manchester that were going around and killing people every night, and if we kill them, then we're doing good. Are we?
Yeah, it's like there's actually this fallacy where it's like, if you were to go back, right, and I told you that this little, newborn baby is Hitler, would you kill the baby?
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Can I take it a step further? What? Do you remember the kids that okay, so a random act of evil happened within two kids. I think they were both early young teenagers, and they beat up a baby. I think the baby's name was Jimmy Bulger. This happened in the UK. Two teenage kids, kidnapped a baby and absolutely...
How old were the kids?
12 and 13, I believe. They abused this baby. So, wow. It's Jimmy Bulger, I think. I think either the baby was called Jimmy or the Can you look that up for us?
Yeah.
Honestly, it was a shocking, horrific event. And I remember hearing about this when I was doing religious studies in high school, and we were talking about, well, what do you do? Are they wrong? Do you punish them? They're kids. Wow, I'm stunned. That just came back into my mind so randomly.
Did they kill him?
I think they did. I think they absolutely abused that baby so badly. And some of you are wondering, like this is... Tell us about it.
James Patrick Bulger, 2-year-old boy from Merseyside, actually, not far away at all.
So the baby was 2?
Abducted, tortured, killed by 2 10-year-olds.
So it was a toddler, it wasn't a baby. But 2 10-year-old kids, not even teenagers then, kidnapped a 2-year-old.
And this was 30 years ago, 1990.
See, this is the thing. How is anyone capable of that? How? How? Because we've sat here now, we've been recording for about 40 minutes, we've mentioned all sorts of dictators, but now we're talking about 2 10-year-old kids doing these acts. How? This is blowing my mind.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like,
it's one thing to sit down and justify why Hitler hated people.
Yeah.
How do you justify 2 10-year-olds? I'm not saying...
Yeah, like, what was their conditioning? What was their reasons behind it? What did they think they were doing? Like, you know, like, naturally kids have... Was there any mental illness with them? Like, what do you call... What did these 2 kids see fit in, you know, harming, abducting, you know, killing this 2-year-old toddler?
That's the question. How do you deal with that, by the way? How do you deal with that? Like, if...
Yeah, where do you even start from, like...
Yeah, where do you start? What do you do to the 10-year-olds? What do? You punish them? I mean, they did get taken to correctional facilities for people their age. I'm sure of that. But you can't give them a life sentence. What do you do? Do you arrest the parents? Do you arrest the parents?
Not necessarily.
Would you arrest the parents?
But you would investigate it, definitely. It could be something that they were seeing, hearing, you know, like I said, you know, things going inside them where that made them more prone to do this thing.
Yeah, because kids are like a sponge. They take things in, right?
Yeah. What are they?
There's a Kurdish saying, actually. It says, the adult will spill the water and the kid will walk into it. Because the kid can only do what it sees. So that's scary then. Is it that these 2 kids from Merseyside, not to judge the area, but they came from a place of evil. They came from a place where this was normal. Did they come from a place where they saw their parents abusing children? Did they get abused as kids?
That's very necessary. That trauma could lead to more trauma as well. Like, you know, if your upbringing was bad and that's not been dealt with, then you could cause you know, harm to your kids as well. Just because of your conditioning and stuff. So, you know, there's so many factors. It's such a big thing. Like, for example, we talked about Hitler, right? But we didn't mention the fact that about barriers. So, you know how, like, if I was to elicit harm to someone, I would blame myself. But if you was down somewhere in, like, Russia and called me over the phone and said, do this or else, then I would be like, okay, me killing someone is you killing someone because I'm not there. I'm just a messenger on your behalf. So we make these mental blocks, mental barriers, right? And this is tested, like, in, like, laboratories where, you know, there was an experiment where, again, neurotypicals, they were meant to electrocute someone for learning. So they were taught...
Oh, I remember this.
So they were told that this was for learning, right? So they memorized, like, sentences and stuff. And then they would, you know, increasingly change the voltage, right? Whenever mistakes were happening. And then they were...
At their own discretion, right?
Yes. So there was many different types of trials, but there was one where there was barriers. So, for example, the experimenter was calling the person over the phone and saying, do it, I'm telling you to do it. Can you do it, please? Can you give him the 450 maximum shock, please? Even though the shock wasn't real, it was just voices. But, you know, when the condition where the experimenter was present and calling him over the phone, the obedience fell through the roof. Like, these guys were, you know, and asked why they're doing it. They're like, you know, I'm just acting on behalf, like, a messenger of, like, these people.
Can I just say, by the way, some of these, like the Stanford Prison Experiment and like what you just described, those things are considered immoral now. But I actually think, this is a very bad argument, some psychology students might eat me up for this, but I don't think the right thing to do is to stop those experiments. We need to understand these things. What we're basically doing, the psychological community is saying, look, these experiments, they're evil, right? Let's repress them. They're not using the exact words, but that's what they're doing. They're repressing them.
It's ethical committees, though. It's like ethical committees saying that
how will we ever understand it? Like, should you not get into the mind of the criminal, of the person, in order to understand what they do? Can you not learn to speak to them? Because I don't think by stopping these experiments, we're not getting anywhere. I really don't think we're getting anywhere. I think if you have consent, and if you can find a way to relatively do these experiments safely, they should continue. I think the Stanford Prison Experiment is one of the most important psychological discoveries, or I wouldn't say it was the first time any such experiment happened, right? This thing had happened before, such situations, but it's one of the most important things of the modern psychological world, and it can't be repeated again. Now you're thinking, well, that's evil. Why would you want that to be repeated again? No, I just want us to truly understand what it is like to have a corrupt mind, corrupted by power.
It's so hard these days to get good paper in psychology. Because
Yeah.
they're so it's so hard to get the right things, passed through the ethics committees and actually carry out some new and we need these new researchers. We need good
Everyone's
people in
scared.
psychology.
Everybody wants to sound virtuous. Everyone needs to be like, oh, I'll never hurt anybody. Well, no, you will. You will. You just haven't been put in
That's
a
what I was
situation.
talking to you about though when I asked you that question. So basically, minor harms can sometimes lead to good. So like for example, a little bit of ethics harm could lead to a greater understanding or something. Or for example, like when I inject a vaccine into a kid, right, who doesn't want it, it's painful, but that pain is suffering. That's evil. But that small act of evil may stop him from getting measles, rubella, mumps, coronavirus. Like, do you get me? So there are some occasions where we need to inflict a little bit of evil for the greater good. And I don't actually agree with the concept of the greater good. But the thing is, sometimes it's necessary. Like for example, with prisons, right? The whole concept of prisons is deterring, reforming, and punishing. Actually, punishing as well. So they're actually being punished. Their time is being taken away from them, because of a crime they committed. So sometimes it's necessary. Like we can't just go against saying that there should be no evil whatsoever, because that's an idealism. That's something that will never happen in this world.
That's a fallacy. You're expecting people to never have a dark side.
So there will definitely be evil, but there is the right type of evil and the wrong type of evil.
Remember though, we said it at the beginning, in order to actually be a good person, you must be capable of evil and not do it. I'll say it again. If you're not capable of a certain act, then you're not a good person for not doing it. You're just incapable. That's
why I suppose we have these morals. Because the thing is, humans need morals because of our nature. We're evil by its very, like for example, if you watch Game of Thrones or Westworld or any show that tells you about if we didn't have laws, how would we behave, right? We would, like for example, Westworld, where they have robots and you could go in there and do whatever you like, basically. People just went there and killed and raped and did the worst kind of treatment with these robots. So if we had a free reign, we would do so much evil. That's why we need morals, reforms, religions to help us to do good.
Yeah, we always have hierarchies. Again, we always have hierarchies. But what you just said reminded me of a point. The Japanese believe, well, it's like a Japanese proverb, right? They believe we have three faces. The face that you show to the world, the face that you show to the people close to you, and the face that you show to yourself. And this third face is the most honest face. And I can give that in the most smallest examples. There are times in which our society makes us feel bad for certain wants, certain needs. We get put into groups. We get put into societies that have certain norms. So, if your norm, for example, is to have multiple wives, right? In the Western world, this is not acceptable. So therefore, you might only share that with yourself when you're at home. You might, oh man, I really want a second wife, right? Now you go to the Middle East, and they allow 4. So therefore, this is something now you can say in public. So do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
so you alternate,
relevant, isn't it?
Yeah.
But also, there's difference between what's acceptable and what's accepted. Like for example, slavery, right?
Definitely.
So slavery was accepted at the time, and now is not accepted. But it still, even then, wasn't acceptable. Like, do you get me? Like, as a human thing, right? To enslave the weak, right? It wasn't an acceptable...
We say that, but they must have thought it was acceptable if it goes on 400 years.
But pulling someone against their will, everyone knows is not acceptable. But
they did it
accepted.
anyway. They did it anyway.
It was accepted, but not acceptable. Because of the human moral code. Like, do you get me? So what's accepted keeps changing, but what is acceptable kind of stays the same.
It's too fragile. Maybe that's the problem then. Maybe why we have the reason why we have so many issues is because everything seems to be so fragile. We can't stick to certain norms. Maybe then it is true that without structure we would actually be lost. Like there needs again the word hierarchy. You're going to keep hearing it. If there isn't an actual hierarchy, if there isn't someone that you can be held accountable to, then you can attack these. You can commit these crimes. But it goes back to the point. Who is holding the leader accountable? Like you said, evil spreads downwards. It's like a pyramid, right? And it starts from the top. And you know what, right? You can say God. But that's in the afterlife.
No, we need a good justice system that takes care of the thingy.
Yeah. No one can be untouchable.
Even the judge, who is like the Supreme Court justice, right? Even he has to be accountable to the jury. Do you get me?
We're hearing that right now, actually. There were problems going on with the US election, and everyone's being questioned. For good or for worse, I don't know.
Was it you, Lazo? Was it you?
It was me. I rigged everything, guys. It was me. It was me, you know. I sneaked through to America. I made sure that he lost.
Just after this podcast, we called the 502s.
Yeah,
on
I was paid off by China. So, I want to, unless you have any final points, I want to segue onto Sigmund Freud.
Yeah, let's go.
Freud, by the way, the father of modern psychology, he was heavily ridiculed. I understand why, but cannot be understated or underrated for the revolutionary practices that he put into psychology.
Especially with children.
Especially with children, especially with women. This man was seeing victims of war, of rape, in 1915 in Vienna, when this wasn't considered acceptable, when women were considered a lesser gender, you know?
Yeah. And especially with kids, like, you know, Freud was one of the first people in the West to point out that trauma, illnesses, mental conditions actually start off in childhood. They have their roots in, you know, the psychosexual stages and stuff, where now we don't think of psychosexual stages, but we know that like DID or, you know, schizophrenia can have a cause, you know, the environmental trigger could be there present in childhood. So childhood is now such an important thing, and, you know, childhood development, attachment, all that kind of stuff has led on from Freud's first theories.
Freud was right. I think when Freud talks about the archetypical mover, when Freud talks about condensing your children, not letting them do anything, not letting them live, not letting them grow up, I think that's a really important point. Now, we're not actually going to talk about the psychosexual stages, which are oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genitalia, genital. But what I really want to say about Freud is the talking therapy also became very famous with him. What seems normal today of going to see your counselor and your psychiatrist, has become normal through people like Sigmund Freud, who was also, by the way, this should be noted and not underrated, a teacher to Carl Jung. Now, you might say Carl Jung was better, but that's not the point. There might be no Carl Jung without Sigmund Freud. So we're definitely attacking the psychology community here and saying, do not disrespect Sigmund Freud on the Flow podcast.
No, he had some, like, outrageous things that have no scientific proof because they're unfalsifiable, right?
But isn't all of psychology?
No, there's actually like falsifiable stuff in psychology as well. Like, for example, there is nothing more conclusive than the dopamine hypothesis in schizophrenia. Nothing on the face of this earth. Like, every single study finds the same thing in terms of the dopamine.
But that's because you can directly look at those chemicals.
Exactly.
What if we took it back to the Stanford Prison experiment again? And what if I said you can't actually measure the validity of the results because Philip Zimbardo might have deliberately wanted to make his results sound more lavish than not?
But still, it's scientific because we can actually get it out and redo it. We can have we can control for more confounding variables this time. You know, have it more set out. You know, try it in different parts of the world to give it more validity, to give it more generalizability, all that kind of stuff. So it's still a scientific method.
Personally, all I'm trying to say is that because psychology is predominantly a social science, would you consider it a social science?
It's a social science, but it's also can be a science.
It's in between. It's definitely not sociology, but it's not chemistry.
Yeah, no, but I think it's not hard science. We call it a soft science.
Yeah, it definitely links both though. Like, for example, why people are depressed, can you give them medication? Yeah. So to be a psychiatrist, you would need to have a medical degree. But to talk about Freud in the most important sense, you have to talk about the three main things.
Yeah.
Id, ego, and superego. Now you're asking, what is that? Okay. Id is your evil tendency. Id is your tendency to your over-sexual side, your evil side, your aggressive side. Superego is your morality. Superego is always do right, listen to your parents, follow your religion. And ego is you, kind of, right? And has to just mix it all together. And what I like about what Sigmund Freud said is Freud highlighted that we're always in a constant fight within our inner self. There's the good side, there's the bad side. And he said that our ego or ourselves, we have to learn to balance them. This was a huge breakthrough. What do you think about those
three
things?
He talked about, you know, the unconscious.
Yes, that one, the iceberg.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he called about these unconscious conflicts that are always occurring between the id, the ego, the superego.
Yeah.
So, you know, the superego and ego are there in the surface, at the consciousness. There's the unconsciousness we can't access, and then there's the preconscious or the subconscious, which is the preconscious is like your dreams, you know, the slip of the tongue, you know, us getting glimpses into the unconsciousness. So the id always lies beneath the preconscious. The superego can lie in the preconscious, conscious, and subconscious, and unconscious. And the ego is the conscious part. So your basic conscious part is neither good, neither bad. It's a, you know, in between. But
I agree.
the evil tendencies are there in the back. We don't quite understand them. We see them in dreams. We see them in outlets. We see them in like those parts of you where you're like, that wasn't me. I don't know what had taken over me. But that is you. That is your id.
Which is a big lie, by the way. When people say those things, never believe them. Actually, just a side note, and this is advice for anyone who's listening. I don't mean this in an evil way, but I definitely mean it as a fact. When people are angry at you, listen to them. Listen to them. Especially if you're in a relationship and your girlfriend gets angry at you after 2 weeks of like just acting like there's no problem. Listen to people when they're angry. Listen to people when they're angry. That is when they speak the most truth. Because that's when, to put it in Freud's terms, the id takes over. The superego has been pushed to the side. There is no more morality. There's no more repression, which is a defense mechanism. And you're straight away pushed into your honesty.
You are most yourself at those points.
Yeah.
That is what a person truly is. Those points of outbursts, of anger and all that, that is what the truest form of that person is.
Yeah, it might not be right. It might not be right. It doesn't mean that what you're saying is right. But it's important for the person to listen to what you said and for you to understand what you said. So, now that we've talked about that, you talked about the conscious, didn't you? Like, how it's, I think you said how it's like an iceberg?
Yeah, so like, what do you call, there's different types of like therapies as well. For example, like dream analysis and stuff where, you know, you try to like go inside, what do you call, your dreams and analyze what you're unconscious trying to say, or, which I don't really agree with, but also
Really?
like talk therapy. Yeah, it's all scientific. But talk therapy, for example, where you just talk about your day basically, and the guy's just listening to you, and he just probs you on, or she probs you on, and then you just talk so much that you have some slips, or you might talk about certain things, or the way you're talking about these things.
You get comfortable.
Yeah. So things might slip out, and that is also said to be from the preconscious, the unconscious.
See, here's the thing, right? I genuinely believe that dream analysis is real. Because...
Yeah, but whose dream analysis are you looking at? Because the thing is, I love the fact that we can do that, dream analysis and stuff.
But I'm not saying just
Freud's
any dream.
dream analysis is every single thing in Freud's dream analysis leads to sex. Like every single, you see a horse, you see a balloon, you see a house, anything you see in Freud's dream analysis.
Okay, so we know that dream, that Freud talks about the Oedipus complex and penis envy, and I'm not saying that that's
little
necessarily
hands.
right. What
Everyone,
I'm trying to say is,
search up little hands after this, please.
what I'm trying to say is, Josefa, is that the reason why I believe dream analysis works is that sometimes, not all the time, it can be a direct reflection onto your actual feelings. Now, have you ever had a situation in which you were very panicked and because of, I don't know, let's say your university exams, let's say a responsibility that you needed to do right. Have there been situations in your life that due to them, you've had nightmares at night?
Oh, definitely. I definitely
So Freud
agree.
is right.
No. That's what I'm saying. Dream analysis
Freud's
is right.
concept is right.
The thing is, Freud, like, he was like the baby in this. He started this off. I feel like the dream analysis occurred before him as well. But the interpretation of dreams, right, is much more complex than Freud suggested. Freud,
No, I don't disagree with that.
Well, Freud, like, literally, his reductionist approach on taking every single thing in dream analysis and relating it to sex, right, that I don't agree with. But I do agree dream analysis is very powerful. It's very strong. You know, even with like different religions, and there's so many different practices on it, that it's like a whole art. And I wouldn't just narrow it down to like Freud's version, but you're definitely right.
Of course.
It's definitely something to learn from.
Nothing can be narrowed down to anything. You will see the most excellent performer in a certain sport, and you can't say that the way they did everything was only the right way.
Freud is right in this kind of thing, though.
Freud is right to start these off. Freud really can be considered the father of psychology. Even
if
if
I asked you, like, what is two of the strongest, desires of the human being? It's a sexual desire and the hunger. Like hunger, like if you're hungry, your whole body basically just wants to eat, find
survival,
food.
yeah.
And once you have food, then the other parts want to like take out their desires.
Actually, I would actually say that the hunger is more important than the sexual side.
100%. But once you're hungry, what's the second most strongest desire? When you're fulfilled, like, do you get me?
Yeah.
It's the sexual desire. So I do agree in that sense. But maybe he could have talked about hunger or something a bit more than just.
But here's the thing: it's because that for so long, right? For so long, again, going back into science, we were in these hierarchical groups. We were out there. We were in the wilderness.
Yeah.
We didn't have our cities, and one of the only ways to pass your genes on wasn't by a marriage that you found online or an arranged marriage. It was, if I'm not the strongest, if I'm not putting my genitalia out there, I can't. There'll be no me.
Is that you like bringing your id out or what?
That is your id. That is your id. That is your.
I'm talking about
That's
you.
your No, not. That's your archetype.
Yeah.
You know that's like. Oh, I
It's
don't
such
know.
a fascinating concept. Like psychology, in it of itself, but like what you call evil. Like it's the biggest thing in philosophy. Like half the things we talked about are like philosophical as well. Like, beneficence and like doing harm to prevent other harm, or like all that kind of thing. It's so philosophical, and you can argue all day and all night and come from like a million different perspectives.
Definitely, and it's important that we do that so we understand things. I want to slide on to defense mechanisms, of which Freud says there are 7: repression, displacement, projection, denial, regression, rationalization, and sublimation.
Yeah.
And you just talked about that, by the way. You said when I'm angry or when I'm stressed, referring to yourself, that is, that you write things down. That's sublimation. Freud would say that you're putting your energy, you're putting your stress, you're putting your id maybe onto paper, for example, or you're going to the gym. That's sublimation. Drawing, that's a creative way of getting things out there. That's another thing that I want to give Freud credit on, and he's not paying me. He's dead. But like, defense mechanisms are really important, and the reason why I didn't bring on earlier when we were talking about Carl Jung, the reason why I didn't talk about repression was because I want to talk about it on this stage with Sigmund Freud, because I know it started with Sigmund Freud. So what do you think about the defense mechanisms that he talked about?
Yeah. Again, they're not falsifiable, because you can't argue because if I say like this is the case, then he'll say no, you've repressed it or you've displaced it. But it's a great way of like understanding what's it called? Understanding human behavior from the start. Like all these different things are ways of like, for example, this is so common of people forgetting their memories, like early childhood memories of trauma or something that evil that happened in their life, right? In relation to this podcast, that these what do you call like displacement or rationalization, or what do you call
all of them
just forgetting this completely has happened.
Here's the thing though, right? What if I said we can go through the list and give an example for each one? Would that not make it real enough? Like, I get it, there's no empirical evidence, there's no analytic algorithm to tell me that I'm right. But surely we've all had a situation where we've repressed a memory in order to keep ourselves happy or to keep ourselves from blowing up at somebody else, right? Surely we've all projected our insecurities onto someone else at some point. Or
displaced it, yeah.
We've displaced it by, instead of getting angry at our boss.
Something we do all the time, rationalization.
Rationalization is one. You make an example, like when you have a large ego, by the way, right? Hashtag I might have one. But the point is, it's like, you want to make an excuse for every time you fall, every time you lose, because you're like, no, I have an ego. I'm good at this. I'm a champion.
You can literally do anything. You can do anything, man, and you will rationalize it. Like, do you get me? You'll be like, no, I did this because, or like
denial.
Yeah,
it's like denial.
It's like, for example, if you're in the queue and someone's taking way too long to order, you're like, that person intrinsically is evil. His whole purpose in my world is to cause harm, delay my me going to work and this and that. But when you're there and you take some time, you're like, no, I'm the main character. Like, I was just
this is your world. Yeah,
profound by another conversation, or perplexed, or I was just thinking about what to order, or you get me. Like, we rationalize everything.
Humans are inherently selfish. I think not because to be bad to everybody else, but I think we're inherently selfish because over our evolutionary period, that was the only way we could survive. As much as we had to be in groups, in order for us to succeed, we had to be selfish. And the same thing happens now, right? If you have a certain career, you have to sacrifice certain other things, right? Now, going back to the points about defense mechanisms, I think they're necessary for our sanity at times. I genuinely believe if we didn't have these defense mechanisms, these these actions,
For example, if you
we
went
might
through
really
trauma,
mess ourselves up.
you
Yeah.
can't like literally think
Okay.
about trauma every day, every night, every single
So
second
you
of your
repress it.
existence forever.
You repress it.
Yeah, you have to go over it. You have to understand. You have to do something to it, basically. Anything to get out of the way so you can focus on the task at hand.
Yeah, it's survival. It's moving on. And if you're not capable of this, you will fall victim to your own mind. And I would say that a lot of people who have psychological problems are unable to maybe understand. Well, I wouldn't say you can understand your defense mechanism, because it's often a defense mechanism is like, almost like a muscle memory.
It's like you're unconscious doing it to you.
It just happens. Yeah, it's like it's someone in the back pulling the strings. What, Lazo? We need to be in denial, because otherwise you'll feel too bad about yourself and you might spiral into depression. Do you know what I mean? Maybe it's necessary, like you said, what evil is necessary? Well, individual evil can be necessary. Maybe it is important for me to say that I might be in denial and say, this podcast did not go well because Huzaifa did not do his prep, for example, right? But that denial might be necessary for me to come next week and still perform well. Whereas if I don't say that, and if I take full responsibility, I might come in next week and feel down on myself. So it's understanding. Knowledge is not understanding either. I'm giving you these defense mechanisms. It doesn't mean you understand them straight away. You must live. The only way you can know is if you must live. One thing, by the way, about all these people, whether it's Philip Zimbardo, Jordan Peterson, Carl Jung, or Sigmund Freud, they're all old men. And the reason for that isn't because society is dominated by old men. Well, that's a conversation for another time. It's because experience teaches better than anything else. So me and Huzaifa sat down and we can talk about all the teachings, but to truly understand them, we must live. Yeah. We must see these within ourselves, and we must learn how to...
We will like listen to our own podcast like down the line, like 5-10 years later, and we'll have completely different ideas, and we'll have
and that's only normal. But you must be in a good place. You must be in a position in which you're surrounded by the right people, so you can then become the right person. Because like we said, evil and power and the displacement of it can be very circumstantial. Soldiers that we talked about who were honourable then got a discharge. A non-honourable discharge, by the way, because you can have an honourable discharge and you can just be kicked out. People who had medals and then they went to Abu Ghraib prison and they committed these atrocities.
Evil is all around.
People that are mothers, that are fathers, that have kids, that have siblings. People that you would think are never capable of any of these things. Same thing happened in Nazi Germany. Same thing happened in communist Russia. Same thing happens now. So many atrocities. But the problem is that we have other focuses as humans, so we don't ever decide to look upon these things.
Evil is all around us, and we need to get better at dealing with it. Firstly and foremost, like within ourselves, our environments. Then we talk about the wider world and stuff. But firstly, it happens within the individual. Like I need to look at what's troubling me. All these things are just to displace it. This is your mind doing things, but we need to resolve things. We need to go towards resolving issues, and it's very hard sometimes. People would rather have it forgotten than actually try to resolve the issue. But it's about forgiving people. It's all about like, what do you call? Because the thing is, you don't want someone to have to live in your head rent free. Like, do you get me? Like, you need to allow forgiveness to occur and stuff like that, so you can move on. And we need to have much more good now than evil.
I'm going to make 2 points. Firstly, I'll make the serious one, then I'll make the jokey one. The first one is that a quote from Carl Jung is that which we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. And what that means is, if you keep repressing your anger, eventually it comes out against the other person and it will feel like fate. Oh, that had to happen. It didn't have to happen. The most healthy thing you can do is that when you have an issue with someone, you stop them for a second and say, hey, look, am I right in understanding that by saying this, you were directing it at me? I've done it so many times, and I've sounded like a fool so many times, but it's necessary. It's genuinely necessary. Because then if I don't, what ends up happening is, 2 weeks down the line, I have a fight with somebody. Then there must be understanding. And the jokey thing that I was going to say is that a friend of mine a friend of ours did a poll on Instagram and said, would you rather have 10 mil or get 100 mil but give 80 of it to your ex? And he shared the results, and most of the people were saying they'd rather have 10 mil instead of the extra 20, just so they wouldn't give 80 to the ex. And that goes on to you, by the way, like people living in your mind rent free. It's something crazy, man.
We would rather cause harm to someone else or take away good things from someone else than have good things done to us. Like, that's crazy. Like, evil is more stronger sometimes than good.
Oh, I think it's very much easier to fall to your shadow self. I honestly believe that the anger that rages through, it is easier to quickly get that energy and put it into a punch into someone's face rather than to calm yourself down. I think it's harder to be a good person than it is to be a bad person. And that's why good people are often so underrated. You know, we look at it and we think, well, you're supposed to be good. But most of us aren't. So therefore it's harder. And you know what? One thing that just came to mind, scapegoating. Carl Jung always talked about this. People are always blaming someone else. And you know what? We see this a lot in the political field. It's like no matter what happens, right blames left, left blames right. And it's the same thing everywhere you go. You know, so...
It's that thing about acting as an agent of someone rather than actually like doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't know how we can move on to a world
it
where...
was circumstance or the stars or my horoscope or whatnot that led me to do this thing. Like, it wasn't me that was doing it. What could be easier to believe in it? Like...
Yeah. It's easier. It's convenient. It's convenient. You can go on your day, you can feel good about yourself, and you can blame somebody else.
Or it's like, you know, self-help where it's like, think and grow rich, right? What's easier than just thinking and growing rich? Like, do you get me? Like, forget the action part.
You know, there was actually one idiot who believed that if he thought it, it's like, I think therefore I am, right?
Yeah.
And one person actually tried to fly. Someone actually, this is a fact.
Did they harm themselves really
Someone
bad?
actually tried to fly.
Did they harm themselves?
They died. I think they
On
died.
that note.
I don't know. No, I don't. No, listen. I don't think we should end. I think we have a few more points.
Go on then.
You tell me about Jordan Peterson. Go on.
Yeah, so Jordan Peterson expands on, you know, the shadow self and stuff, and he's a psychologist, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he takes it more into that realm, because I feel like Carl Jung actually took it more spiritual, his visits to India and stuff.
The yin and yang
made him-
and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I feel like this, like, itself right now is still in the development, in the works, and I feel like future psychologists need to, like, bring this stuff into the mainstream and bring it into, what do you call, actually physically finding out what these things are. Because we've literally just started, like, even like neurosurgeons, when they're operating on the brain, like, they're taking your memories out and they don't even know it. Like, do you get me?
Yeah.
So, like, this is the beginning. Like, this isn't all understanding. We're here, like, saying that we don't know nothing to start and understand these things further.
No, I agree with you, and it's very important that, again, we come to self-understanding, and I think psychology needs to allow people to really understand and experience these things more. One thing I would say is that it's definitely not a general practice to work on yourself. Even self-help, it's not the same thing. It's not. Don't let people sell you that stuff. Honestly, I'm gonna start cussing out self-help again. But no, I think on that point, if you're happy with it, I think then we should call it a day. Appreciate you all for listening again. Thank you very much. Again, though, if you're looking at this through video and we have a mask on, it's still the middle of the pandemic here. We keep moving. We move. You know, we keep going. Virus or not. And thank you for your feedback. Drop everything in the comments and let us know how you'd like us to do a part 2 on
feedback
evil.
is very much appreciated, and you know, we'll keep new topics coming in and interesting topics that you'd like.
All right, thank you for your time, guys. Take care.